Hi, my name is Christopher Sullivan, and this is my first YouTube video. I think of no better no better reason rather, to start broadcasting on YouTube than for making an endorsement video for Dr. Ron Paul, first for Republican nominee for president, and for overall president of the United States of America. I served as a Marine Corps intelligence officer from 2002 to 2011. Separated at the rank of captain about 8.5 years, and finished my service at the Marine Corps Intelligence Activity, where I served over a year as the branch head for the Middle East branch. Really, I'm posting this video in an effort to try to wake up other Marines, other veterans of all services. It was actually a Marine who woke me up to Dr. Paul. And Dick Adams, if you're out there, I really appreciate you taking the time in 2007 aboard the USS Kearsarge to tell me to go check out Dr. Paul. Both you and Dr. Paul have drastically bettered my life. I appreciate it. Well, so why do I support Ron Paul, and why do I think you should? Well, Ron Paul has over 30-year record, it's verifiable, of supporting the Constitution above all else, of advocating for liberty, not just liberty of libertarians and so forth, but liberty of all Americans, even those who would freely turn their liberties over for perceived security, which they never get. Dr. Paul takes his oath to the Constitution seriously. As a veteran, I took mine very seriously. I still do. And actually, in part, it was my oath to the Constitution that caused me to decide to leave service, because I felt that my active duty service wasn't serving the Constitution, and it wasn't preserving the liberties of the people. I'll get into foreign policy in a short bit. But Dr. Paul consistently votes in support of the Constitution, even when it's somewhat painful to do so. When there's 434 votes against one, you have a pretty good idea of who that one vote in dissent is, and the reason why. Ron Paul is the only candidate right now who has the economic wisdom, knowledge, and really prescience to know how we got in this mess, how to get us out, and through his leadership and the economic ways to do so. Not that it's the power of the executive to maestro the economy. It's not. But if you go back to why Dr. Paul got involved in the first place in making a run for Congress back in the early 70s, it was because Nixon took us off the gold standard, closing the gold window August 15th, 1971. And just fun fact, the average fiat currency lifespan is about 40 years. Well, we just passed that, and we're in some trouble. So Nixon closed the gold window, and Dr. Paul got involved in politics. He began studying Austrian economics, folks like Mises and Hayek. There's plenty of good other ones that suggest checking out Mises.org. But he also wrote the case for the gold dollar. I'm sorry, the case for gold. It was a minority report to the Gold Commission in the early 80s that Reagan asked to be done to examine should we go back on a gold standard. And Ron Paul wrote the minority report for that. It's available for free. And in the early 80s, Congressman Paul forecasted the mess that we're in right now, this terrible economic mess that most of the other candidates think we can get out of through a continued central bank, through inflationary monetary policy, and loose fiscal policy. So, let's see. Dr. Paul has thoroughly understood the dangers behind central banking. He's been a staunch, he's strongly advocated against central bank of the Federal Reserve. He's informed millions of Americans about the true nature of the Federal Reserve, why it needs to be audited, and ideally why it would possibly need to be ended. Really started that crusade way back in his early days. He's written books about it. He's written several books about economics, about foreign policy, and about liberty. Ron Paul is a true champion of fiscal conservatism. He understands that it's through central banking that our government can have this deficit spending, and through that deficit spending and financing that they can actually wage this perpetual war. All right, and that kind of leads me to to foreign policy. And for a lot of mainstream Republicans, that's the hardest pill to swallow about Ron Paul, is foreign policy. And I'll tell you, for me it was too, because I was living it. I was away from my family, missing the birth of my first child, executing U.S. foreign policy. Well, whether or not you disagree with Ron Paul about his foreign policy, we can't afford it. It needs to come to an end. Either it's through our own will, by recognizing it's flawed and it gets us nothing and it's too expensive, or it's going to come by economic hardship and necessity that way. But even if we could afford it, what do you get for it? All it buys us is more trouble, more enemies, more apparent reason, more terrorists, more apparent reasons to go meddle elsewhere. But it's never ending. It's perpetual war, straight out of George Orwell's 1984. So some other non-Ron Paul supporting Republicans will say, well, he needs a stronger stance on Israel. He doesn't support Israel, and they're our strongest ally. Well, first off, Israel's not an ally. We share a lot culturally, I agree, but there is no treaty. And I can get into that in other videos. But if we removed our foreign aid from Israel for 1% of their GDP, and this is what Dr. Paul recommends, and would seek to do, for 1% of their GDP, Israel could regain its sovereignty and not have to mother may I to the U.S. for everything it wants to do. Israel can regain its sovereignty and act in its best interest as it sees fit. And there would no longer be this perceived, it would no longer be perceived that everything Israel does has the backing of the U.S., whether overtly or covertly. So, I got to tell you, I became a Marine out of a sense of duty to the Constitution, the American people, and American way of life. All right, and really, our foreign policy, it's shredding both. Okay, the international meddling and wars of aggression, they serve to create more terrorists. For every misguided drone strike that kills 10 people of collateral damage, well, you potentially create another 50 to 100 folks who would take up arms against U.S. service members, and so it goes perpetually. Then that increased threat of terrorism is then used to shred our Bill of Rights. When you take a look at the Patriot Act, and you take a look at the National Defense Authorization Act, as recently passed by the Senate, and those are really testament to that, how this perpetual war leads to threat of terrorism leads to you needing to give up your rights for security, and it can't be done. You can't trade your security, you can't trade your liberty for security. And once you give up your liberties, they're very difficult to reclaim, as our founders warned. So, I guess in closing, I'm getting towards 8 minutes or so. Ron Paul's an honorable man. He's proved it over 30 years. Longer than I've been, really, he's started his career longer than I've been alive. He's a man of honor, of courage, of family values. The man's been married to the same woman for, I believe, 54 years. Talk about courage. He's been the lone voice as a champion for liberty and the Constitution, going back to the late 70s. And overall, he's a man of outstanding character. Some of the other folks really leave me in doubt. I don't know if I'd leave my children with them. And lastly, I'll close with this. When I was first showing Ron Paul really through videos and so, and some material in 2007, I was hesitant because his positions made me uncomfortable. They showed me how the foreign policy that I was supporting and the way that I was thinking was contrary to liberty, contrary to the Constitution, and really contrary to good economic sense. So, but I really believe, though, if you listen, as I did, with an open mind, that you'll see that he really is a once-in-a-century candidate who knows how we got in this mess, and knows he understands it. He knows how we got in it, and really he has the leadership and the knowledge to know how to constitutionally lead us out of it. So with that, I'll close. Please feel free to make comments below, and really hope you vote for Ron Paul 2012. Appreciate it.